I'm Tim Rich. A few things to tell you about me by way of a prologue. First of all, from the moment that I can remember, I always wanted to be a psychologist. Always wanted to be a psychologist. I was the youngest in a very dysfunctional family, and I think that was my way of trying to figure it out, you know? Second thing to tell you is that there was no religion in my family growing up. There was no animosity about it, but there was just no religion. There was no talk of God, there was no going to church, I wasn't baptized, just no religion. And then when I was about 13, this African-American man who dropped out of college, he was playing football in college, dropped out of college, came to my school to work as a custodian. And he kind of took me under his wing. And it was then that I heard about this God, this God who wanted to be in an intimate relationship with us, this God who wanted to embrace all of us, this God that we could share our deepest fears and our greatest concerns. Keith told me about that kind of God. And so I went home and I started a very quiet, simple, secretive conversation with something or some kind of God. Third thing I want to tell you, just in case you're wondering, that's not me. Okay, got that. So my story, the story that I want to share with you, the piece of my story, capital S, that I want to share with you, kind of starts on June 7th, 1985. I'm down at the Outer Banks of North Carolina. I'm down with friends of mine, Bob and Amy, and my fiancée, Jean-Marie. I've just finished the second year of a doctoral program in counseling and psychology. And I'm just trying to get away from the pressures of my thesis. I'm just procrastinating in a really lovely place. That's what I'm doing, you know? Jean-Marie and I had met in November of the previous year, November of '85. Her aunt had introduced us to each other, and the relationship took off right from the start. So much so that in fact by December, just 6 weeks later, everyone was kind of looking under the Christmas trees to see if there was an engagement ring. So not even just in our own bubble of sort of infatuation, but even the folks around us, they saw that there was something special between us. No proposal on Christmas Eve, but in April, we were engaged. And she walked around for so long with this smile ear to ear on her face that, in fact, her friends took to calling her Grin Face. Grin Face. Not a bad nickname. So Jean-Marie and Rob and Amy and I were down at the Outer Banks. It was our first chance to plan for the wedding that was to happen the following January. It was a beautiful summer morning. Rob and I jumped into the waters to swim around a little bit, and Amy and Jean-Marie went for a walk down the beach. When they came back, we got out of the waters, and I said, "So, how's your conversation with Amy? What did you all talk about?" And she said, "Well, Amy asked me if I believed in soulmates." I said, "Well, what did you say?" She said, "Well, I don't know if there's just one, but I believe that there are special mates for our souls." And I said, "Well, is that me?" She looked at me, she said, "You know, I am still a Grin Face." And there was this sort of quiet moment, and I kissed her, and then we ran into the waves to play. So we were in the water for maybe 5 minutes or so, and all of a sudden, we noticed that the current had pulled us about 100 yards offshore. And we were in this part of the water where the waves are sort of the early waves are sort of coming down on it, and very quickly it went from being fun to being a struggle to being a panic. And she's scared. She's not a good swimmer. I get a hold of her hand, and the waves keep on crashing on us, and then some fierce wave sort of hit us and threw us in different directions. Rob got to me, sort of dragged me in. Amy, who was a real strong swimmer, got to Jean-Marie. I remember on the beach watching the sort of drama unfold with Amy and Jean-Marie, and the waves would crash, and I'd look to make sure the two heads were always coming back up out of the waves, you know. And then there was only one head. So Amy eventually swam in. And I don't know how much longer later, a few minutes, 5 minutes, Jean-Marie's body washed up on shore about 100 yards down. By that time, someone had already called paramedics, and so the EMT was there, and they began CPR. I remember looking at her lips; they were blue, and doing this sort of three-step dance where I'd walk up to watch and look for signs of life, and then when I couldn't look anymore, I'd sort of walk away, but then I'd come back and watch again. Sort of numb, not really believing that this was happening, and there's definitely some out-of-body disassociation that happens when, nightmares, when you're in the middle of a horror storm. Helicopter landed on the beach and took her away to the mainland hospital. We had to ride the ferry to the shore, to the mainland, and it was when we got to the mainland that the skipper, poor guy, not equipped to deliver this kind of news, said to me, "Well, I'm sorry, son, but they couldn't revive her." So, eventually, about 5 days later, I went back to our house. And, the next 12, 13, 14 months, I don't know, were just filled with just wild swings of emotions and thoughts all over the map. One of the things that I will never forget, that I can still feel sometimes if I think about it in my body, is just how hard I'd sit on the bed and just sob and sob and sob. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I never knew you could feel so much pain when no one's hitting you, Just this gut-wrenching sob. And the first sort of stage of all that grief, I was just raging at this God that I had some kind of conversation with, this supposedly loving God. I was raging that I was still alive and thinking, why couldn't it have been me? I was raging that I couldn't save Jean-Marie. And I just, night after night, would ask these questions to which there were no answers, to whoever was listening, to God, my God. And then I would end up just sobbing and tantruming, just saying, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. It's just out loud. It was summertime, the windows were open. I'm sure my neighbors were like, should we call someone? I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. So several months of this sort of dialogue passes, and I'm with my therapist, this wonderful Jewish woman, and I tell her about my latest sort of tantrum with God. And she says to me, well, that's interesting. So you're sitting there and you're saying, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. She says, well, so what does God say back to you? I say, well, that's a crazy question. I don't know. And I sat there and I thought about it for a while. I went home and I thought about it some more. And this image kind of took focus in my eyes. And I thought, you know, as I'm sitting there tantruming, crying, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you, I think that God is like that patient parent, arms wrapped around me, going, I love you, I love you, I love you. And so something kind of broke loose for me in my grief with that. With the sense that I just wasn't alone in that tantrum. There were still plenty of tears to go, but eventually I got around to this question to wrestle with, which is, okay, so am I going to be a miserable son of a bitch for the rest of my life? Or am I going to choose life? What's it going to be? And I realized that if I was to choose to be that miserable SOB, I mean, not only would that be a waste of my life, but it would be such an insult to the life that Jean-Marie had shared with me and had shown me, you know. And so I chose life. So I'd love to tell you that I went on to fight the good fight. The theme of this night is fighting the good fight. I'd love to tell you that I went on to fight the good fight, and that I tackled some great cause in Jean-Marie's name, or that I developed some fund, you know, in her name, and it's helped thousands of children. And I can't say that. That's not the case. I think the fight that I fought, it wasn't against a global injustice, or it didn't involve a sort of a domestic need. I think it was even more local than that, you know? I think the fight that I fought, the fight that I still fight, the fight that we all end up fighting at some point in time, was a fight between cynicism and anger and bitterness and darkness and despair and hope and joy and light and love. It's a fight that goes on and on. It's a fight, you don't have to go through some horrific experience to fight that fight, but you know, if you've lived long enough, and I'm looking out here, and you know, I'm not passing any judgment, but it looks like you all have lived long enough. Just saying. Then you know what I mean. Because life gets messy pretty quickly. And then it goes from messy to pretty darn painful. And then it's so easy to give in to that fight and to just be bitter and resentful and angry and despairing. But at some point we got to choose to fight the fight and choose whether we're going to sit in darkness or whether we're going to walk in light. Okay, so I like parallels, so 3 things by way of an epilogue. So the first thing is that I am a deeply happy man, married to a wonderful woman who embodies joy and radiates light. With 4 kids, sometimes 2, sometimes 4, who, yeah, you can ask me in the lobby after that, who sometimes don't fight the good fights, those kids, they fight other fights, but who more often than not stir in me a sense of privilege and hopefulness and joy. Second thing by way of epilogue is that after I finished that conversation with God about whether I was going to be a miserable son of a bitch or whether I was going to choose life, the conversation sort of took a different shape, which was, all right, so here I am. I was 25, kind of a widower. I know some things about death and life that most 25-year-olds don't know. What do you want to do with me? And so, if you can't read the fine print, I'm an Episcopal priest. Third thing I want to tell you is that that's not me. It's one of my dearest friends in the world, Jeff. Don't tell him I showed the picture. I didn't get his permission, okay? I'm standing about 10 feet behind him, surrounded by 6 others of my dearest, most beloved friends, and 9 of our children. We're down at the Outer Banks, not that far from where Jean-Marie died, for our 18th year together as a group. I don't know why I got the question mark on his back. You can ask him one thing. Someone asked me, isn't it hard to go down there, to vacation down there where this terrible thing happened? And it's a good question, it's a fair question, and truth be told, the first few years we went down there was plenty of pain. But I fought the fight against that pain because, the Outer Banks, if you've never been there, it's a sacred place. It's an amazing place. It's also the place where my daughter caught her first fish, where my sons learned how to body surf, and where my wife has tanned herself. It's a place where the sun comes up every morning over this spectacular, shining ocean. To be a part of that life, to see the sun come up over that ocean, that's something worth fighting for. Thanks very much.